But I mean, if it
Oh,
falls
they
through, they
accept
spend money.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
could.
they can come in front of us, I mean, that's almost.
Good evening, board members and residents, and Happy New Year. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for Monday, January 13, 2014. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Brado?
Here.
Mr. Capral?
Here.
Mr. Swikowski?
Here.
Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. York?
Here.
Mr. Witt? Here. Mr. Verkast?
Here. Thank you. Next is the approval of our consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting and public hearing minutes of December 9, 2013, approval of the bills in the amount of $1,538,176.79, approval of Gabriel Roeder to prepare the actuarial study for the fire pension, and to approve and execute the Smart Specialized Services Operating Assistance Program third-party contract as presented.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capral. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, as I mentioned prior to the meeting, at this point I would like to table items D2 and D3. Otherwise, I didn't hear any other proposed amendments to the agenda.
Mr. Supervisor, I'll make a motion to approve the regular agenda with the aforementioned amendments, omitting D2 and D3.
All right.
Support.
We've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Swikowski. Discussion, board members. Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is announcements. We do have a few announcements. We have a workshop coming up January 21st to talk about infrastructure projects, Beechwood Pump Station, Bayhaven Sewer Main. The Harrison Township Public Library will be hosting multiple events in January. Dan Heaton, a Michigan National Guard Technical Sergeant, will be presenting Selfridge history Thursday, January 16th at 7 p.m. The presentation will focus on the lives and groundbreaking military service of Thomas Selfridge and Byron Q. Jones. Tales with Tales will be this Saturday, January 18th, starting at 11 a.m. Children will get the chance to read to Patty, a licensed, certified, and insured therapy dog. To register for these and all library events, please call 586-329-1261 or stop in the library and sign up. Remember that for all the library events, any children need to be accompanied by an adult. Our trash pickup was disturbed. The cycle was disturbed due to the extreme weather events last week, but our trash pickup is back to its regular schedule. Any questions regarding the pickup, you can call Tringali Sanitation, 1-877-WASTE-19, or email customer service at tringalisanitation.com. And you can also contact the supervisor's office if you have any questions on these or any other issues. And also a lot of this information can be found on the township's website, harrison-township.org.
What time is that workshop?
7 p.m. I did not mention that. Thank you. Any other announcements? All right, hearing none, we'll go into our next agenda item, item B1. This is regarding our water and sewer, or water specifically, water rates. Board members, as a part of our contract with the Detroit Water and Sewer Department, we've conducted a renegotiation of our contract due to the impact of the water storage tank. Mr. Axtell, Dave Newmer, our township engineer, and I met with representatives from DWSD. We took a look at the data from last year. The controls that operate the tank have been in an automated mode, and as a result, we had drastically lower peak numbers throughout the peak summer months. And you may recall that the actual numbers are what are used to dictate our rates. So Detroit Water and Sewer sits down with us and says, basically, here's the data, what numbers do you want to use in a projection for next year? We only had one significant exceedance, but it was the result of a water main break on Union Lake, which was right down from the tank. And it was actually late at night, and we were able to explain that. The water and sewer department will discount that. It wasn't a peak day for the entire system, just for us because of that water main break. We can't predict what next year's rates will be because they're still going through a process of establishing that. But the folks at DWSD took the numbers that we agreed to in this Exhibit B, and was basically an attachment to the contract. They plugged them in to our current rates, and our rates would have gone from about 1.5 million down to 1.16 million. So it would suggest that there would have been a savings of about $340,000. So contract's been drawn up. I believe it's been reviewed by the attorney. Basically, it's an amendment saying that here are the numbers that we'll use going forward. I don't know if there's any questions when Mr. Axtell is here also to speak to it or answer any questions anyone has.
Make a motion to authorize the supervisor and clerk to execute amendment number 3 to Exhibit B of the City of Detroit Water Contract as presented.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Brado. Discussion, board members. Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Bill Servio, resident. I have one question. If we do exceed due to mitigating circumstances, is there any fudge factor there, or do we get penalized from day one?
Okay,
I think the public would like to know that as well as myself. Sure. Thank you.
absolutely. That's a great question. Exceedances can come with penalties. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. And the answer is yes, maybe, I guess you'd say. The way that Detroit works is if there is an exceedance in our number. So for example, I want to say that the number was 4.2. So let's say we say, all right, well, we're not going to exceed 4.2 for, a flow rate in a 1 hour period. That time frame only applies to certain summer months, and it only basically applies to primarily daytime hours, early in the morning till I want to say it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Middle of the night, they don't care. We can exceed to refill the tank. During that time, they're going to sit down with us next year and look at those times and say, did you exceed what you said you would exceed? And if you did, you've got to have an explanation for it. Typically, if you have a water main break, it's obvious that it doesn't coincide with that peak day. It would be incredibly coincidental when we say, oh, no, we have a water main break. But obviously, if we have a water main break, we have several pieces of evidence to prove that the break occurred, where we can say, yeah, literally, that's why the system was, flowing as strong as it was. If we have no explanation, then there is a penalty factor. There's a statistical analysis that DWSD does of our numbers. And, statistics is its own science. But they basically took last year's consumption and they spread out a whole series of dots, and then they multiply it by, a factor of 2 of, likelihood of the statistical likelihood of exceeding it. And the number that they came up with was actually, I believe, if I recall, maybe Dave, you remember, slightly lower than the number we chose.
Actually, yes, it
Right,
was.
right. And the discussion we had with our engineer in those negotiations and with DWSD was that if we chose the number they gave us and we had a problem, we'd run the potential risk of a fine or a penalty. DWSD does not dictate that number. They say, here's the data, choose what you want. Now, it's important to note that if their number was 4.09 and we went to 4.20, that 0.11 difference isn't a significant difference as a, it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings. It might be a $5,000 or $10,000 savings, I don't know exactly. But if we bring that number down too low and we exceed that, then we do run the risk of a penalty unless we can prove that there was an explanation for that. So the advice of the engineer at the time, we chose a number of 4.2, and truly believe that when we sit down with them again next year, we have to sit because it's a negotiating year. We'll likely be able to lower it, although a small fractional amount. But the thought was, we're still learning that tank, even though it's been in full operation. There's still an opportunity to make some adjustments and, rather be conservative with that number of 4.2. So I hope that's a good explanation. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Brado to authorize the supervisor and clerk to execute amendment number 3 to Exhibit B of the Detroit City water contract as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on the agenda is an item from the library. I know we have a representative here from the library. If it's all right, I'll present it to the board, and our Harrison Township Public Library would like to contract with Melissa Goines for library collection development. Library collection development is a library specialty that uses education and experience to maintain and acquire library books that meet the specific needs of our residents. With the current annual circulation of over 29,000 books and videos, a specialist is needed to manage our new book selection and maintain our current book collection. Melissa Goines has the experience and expertise to help the library develop a circulation collection that meets the needs of the community. She has the ability to set the scope of the library collection, add materials that include various formats, diverse topics, and residents' requests. And the proposed motion is to contract with her for an amount not to exceed $125 per week. We have Ms. Carol Wolf here from the library committee, so you can come on up, and I don't know if there's any questions the board has, or if you'd like to add to that.
Well, our circulation is 29,000. Our current collection is, with our videos, our books, and our audiobooks, is 30,000. And as you know, a library collection doesn't remain static. You have to keep bringing in new books, and you need someone with the education and expertise and access to professional journals to pick the books for the community. She does that part. We also have a wish list for our residents. If it's a current book or a popular book, it will get ordered. So it's a very detailed process. It's about 15 hours a week. And it also, in addition to the new books, you have to manage your current collection. And some of that is what books haven't been used for 5 years. You have limited space, so you have to know which books to weed. You also know which books are important, like the SAT, keeping current SAT examination reviews current. So it's things that you need someone with a library degree and that experience to do. So that's what we're asking. We would like to pay her, it's about 15 hours a week she spends on various topics with acquiring books and managing our collection.
Okay.
So are there any questions?
Well, I know that during the staff meeting, we discussed it, And if we do propose to make such a motion and vote on it, I would suggest that we also include that we actually establish or have some sort of a contract with Ms. Goines, something in writing so that we don't appear to be somehow skirting any employment laws. If we're going to contract with her to provide the service, we,
Private contract.
yeah, we should establish a contract. Mr. Huth indicated that he would, help us with that, make sure we have a contract that meets his approval, and make sure that the finance director makes any necessary amendments to the budget to support this and bring that back. So,
Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah.
She's working 15 hours a week, you said?
Well, it's beyond, I mean, she does,
Well, okay.
yeah,
even-
but she volunteers more than that. She volunteers time, but there,
But we're paying her
Yeah.
$125 a week? Is that,
We're
well,
not paying her anything
okay.
right now.
yeah, currently
Yeah.
we're paying her nothing, but
$125
Yeah.
a week?
That's the
Yeah.
proposed.
that's
Yeah,
the
that's
proposal.
proposed.
Wow, that seems really reasonable.
Yeah, yeah,
is.
certainly.
Well, and,
First-
and part of it is to get the penal fines, we have to have somebody with this type of
Right.
certification to be able to get that. So
Yes.
it's really an investment in getting that money back in the long run.
Right,
Right.
I think it's
it's
a
a-
bargain. I'll make a motion to
it is a bargain.
allow Melissa Goines to contract for the library collection development not to exceed $125 per week.
Support.
And if I can offer to add to that.
Private contract. to
Yep,
be
and
developed by the
authorize,
attorney.
and authorize, because I wrote something up, and authorize the supervisor to execute a contract with Ms. Goines, subject to the attorney's approval, and also authorize the finance director to bring any necessary budget amendments forward as required.
I'll amend my motion as stated by Mr. Verkowski.
All right, Mr.
Continued
Taverneau?
support.
All right, continued support by Mr. Swakowski.
Um,
Discussion?
yeah. Where's the 125 gonna be coming from?
From the library.
From the library budget,
Okay, well, you
Yeah.
just said budget amendments.
yes.
Yeah, well, the
yeah.
library
It's
has.
in the
Well, we have our
budget.
budget, yes,
Yeah.
The library
I understand.
fund is in the budget, yeah.
Yeah.
right. So that money is penal fines, it's what we've raised through used book sales, through fundraisers. So it's not any of the taxpayer money, it's all, everything's been raised by the library.
Now, while I will say I'm not necessarily against this, but I certainly would feel much better having more information like that contract. We're starting to go down a path here, and it's nothing to do with this library. But several items now we've had, we'll do this, let's just vote for this and we'll do a contract. We'll do a contract. Well, what's funny about that is, I never see the contracts when they come back. And we've done that now for like 5 years. And
What
it's
it-
nothing against the library.
Just
Okay,
before we get
but-
too
but-
far down on your
but-
point,
but-
what else
but
are
my
you
point-
talking about so I
My point
know?
is, for example, the employment contract. What is this? Is it, I would assume that it's a contract employee. We need to make sure that the union, we're not gonna have union problems because of this contracting, so we need to probably go speak to the union before we really move forward with this. Or, we end up possibly with the grievance from the union if they so choose. Not saying they're going to, but we've been down this road where, they could say, hey, that person is an employee. We're grieving that. We want to put this position in the union contract. We end up spending $20,000 or $10,000, whatever it is, to do that. So what would be nice, especially when it comes to this library, right at this moment, is let's, do this right. Let's get a contract, whatever that is, and I don't know what that's gonna look like, in all honesty. And then get a sign off from the union, so we don't have any, additional fees there. I certainly don't want a grievance, from the union. But, this isn't a lot of money, and I just don't wanna have good money going after, bad.
Sure. Couple points there. Ultimately, when we choose to, say, contract with anyone, whether it be a tree trimmer or someone who's going to help us maintain our library, it's our right to do so. If the union wishes to grieve it and they have a legitimate grievance, we don't have to spend $10,000 to resolve it. But I think this is a reasonable direction to take. By no means are we prepared to hire someone that's going to be a 40-hour per week employee. 125 a week at $6,500 a year. I don't think it's a significant, financial commitment.
That's why I questioned it. It
Yeah.
looks like $5 an hour.
Less
I'd
than
say about
that.
8, yeah,
Yeah.
15.
You know, it's not a lot
Come
of
out to
money.
less
Yeah.
than that.
It's more of a principle. If you have an item, just like we have coming up here.
Well, the
Right,
union
then-
really has no
Well,
claim
well,
to
well,
this.
Well, once again, the
Because
next
it's
item,
not a
the next
covered,
item,
it's not a covered position in the contract.
well, the
It's
next
not
item,
listed.
the next item on the agenda has hired Patrick Maher for, right? So on the agenda item, I have the sheet, and then I have his contract where I can look at and see what the scope of work is and all that, and then I make my vote, yea or nay, right? I don't have anything other than, we're gonna vote on this tonight, we're gonna vote yes. And then at some point in the future, there's gonna be a contract that we don't know and we haven't voted on. We don't know what's in that contract until some later date. That's my point. If there's the contract or the scope of work, I have no problem. Let's vote on it right now. But we're getting in this habit of let's vote on something and then worry about the details later. But then we never have any input on those details. And that's my only point. Not that I'm against it at all.
All right. Any other comments from the board? All right, hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment, so
Okay.
I'll ask you to let someone else use the podium.
Yep, excuse me. Yeah. Bill Servil, resident. If it's necessary to get the fines from the district court, then I guess then you need to fill this position. But I do have a few questions. First off, just a point to make. According to this information here, it doesn't mention videos at all. It mentions videos, that there's 29,000 books and videos. From my wife's experience, I would suspect that it's much more videos than it is books, because she goes in there on Saturdays sometimes to buy books, and she said she's seen ladies go out of there with 7 or 8 kids' videos that the library rents out, or loans out, I should say. So is the person also going to evaluate those? If so, then it needs to be spelled out here, because it's not spelled out in the proposal here, you know, in the details for this. And one other point that wasn't mentioned, if a contract person, you mentioned Mr. Maher, he has to carry workers' comp and liability. At the money you're talking about, I don't know if this person can afford that, but the township still needs to be protected somehow, should something happen. Volunteers are covered under our umbrella, but a contract employee, I don't believe is covered. But that's something that Mr. Huth needs to address. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. I'd like to ask Ms. Wolf to come back up, maybe answer the question about videos. There was a question from the public as to whether or not Ms. Goins' service, in terms of managing the library collection development, whether that does or doesn't include the videos as well as the books.
She did say videos, that's why
Yeah, yeah.
But it doesn't say that in the book.
Well, the videos are considered part of a collection, a library collection.
Okay,
The-
all right.
yeah.
So part of her service would be certainly the entire collection. That's what her
Correct.
specialty is. And nowadays, libraries aren't just limited to just books. Certainly, the videos are a big part of their collection also.
Yes. Mhm.
It says it right in it that the expertise to help the library develop a circulation collection
Yeah.
that meets the needs of the community. Circulation is everything that they loan out on a basis, whether it's books, journals, or
Right.
videos, or, you know, books on tape, whatever the case may be.
Yep.
That's part of the entire collection.
Yeah, I think that the metamorphosis of this is pretty simple. We've got a lady who's been volunteering with our library for quite some time now. She possesses a master's degree in library science and information systems. She's definitely well qualified, and I think that the folks that work with her, the other volunteers, recognize that she's bringing something that's perhaps a little bit above and beyond in terms of qualifications, and although I'm sure, and I know the conversations I had with the library committee members, is they wish that they could pay her what's probably a much higher and fair wage. They also feel guilty that she's volunteering and providing something a little bit more than just her daily labor. She's bringing a certain skill set, and they'd like to reward her or compensate her for that so that she, you know, that they have a good chance of keeping her around for a while to help out the committee. And although it is a low number, I still think it's a, you know, a fair sign that we appreciate the service that she provides for the library.
I would like to see that contract come back to the board for, you know, at a later date, just so we can all have a look at it.
Sure. Yeah, we can distribute that contract to the board, that's no problem.
I- That isn't what I meant by distribute, but.
Well, I mean, we've got a motion on the floor.
No, I
And
understand.
we're voting on it
I
unless
just
someone
think that
removes that
we're
motion.
putting the cart before the horse. How do you hire someone without having the contract on the terms? Nobody would ever do that. I don't go buy a house and say, I'm gonna buy a house from Mr. Verkest. And here, let me sign the papers and let me give you a check. And then you just give me all the documents later. You don't do business that way.
Having said that, I certainly wouldn't draw up a contract to buy the house if we couldn't agree on the price. And the reason why we brought this was because ultimately, the issue in front of us is whether this board is willing to support the library's request to compensate their specialist at a rate of $125 a week. As I perceive it, that's the real question before this board. I would like to think that if Mr. Huth looks over the contract, he's the most qualified to make sure that we've covered all the necessary details. I have no problem saying that this board can review it before we execute that contract.
What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that.
That's my
What-
point. I just said, I'm not against this, but it would be nice just to have the contract, so we have everything together, all in one nice thing. We vote yes, and we all move on. I think that's what I'm saying.
Sure. Yep. All right. Any other discussion? We've got a motion. I don't know if that satisfies your needs or not, or if there's an interest in amending that motion, or if not, voting on it.
I'd like to see the contract come back to the board and we
Are you offering that as an
vote on
amendment?
that.
Amended to say it's a concept that you,
Hold on.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm asking. You know, just bring the contract back to the board the next meeting, we look at it, and we all vote yay, and we move on.
in principle.
Yeah, in principle.
All right. Well, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Switkowski. I don't know if either of you are interested in that amendment or not.
I feel confident for the capacity of the supervisor and the attorney to put together a contract as needed for this amount of money. So with that, I wouldn't be willing to amend my motion at this point.
All right. Any other discussion, board members? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Switkowski to allow Melissa Goins to contract for library collection development not to exceed $125 per week, and to authorize the supervisor to execute the contract with Melissa Goins, subject to attorney's approval, and to authorize the finance director to bring any necessary budget amendments forward. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, item D1. Board members, we have received a contract extension proposal from Patrick Maher of Community Planning and Management to renew our professional planning services contract for 3 more years. The proposal comes as basically a renewal. It doesn't include any rate increases. We have the extension attached. Based on the history we've had with Mr. Maher and the caliber of his work, I'm confident that it's wise for us to continue our relationship with CPM. So that's what the motion would suggest. I don't know if there's any questions, discussion, or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the execution of the 3-year contract extension with Community Planning and Management, PC, for professional planning services as presented.
I'll support that.
All right, we got a motion by Mr. Switkowski with support by Mr. Tominello.
And I would just like to mention that, being on the PC, the liaison, I work with Mr. Maher almost on a weekly basis, and, the contract that he submitted, especially at a no-cost increase, he supports and provides a lot of free services to the township. So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm sure that our contract would probably be increased by 50% or more if we would look for somebody else, so.
And
so
pay
we're-
for everything we receive.
Exactly,
Right.
and he's very good, he's very accessible, he's a face-to-face kind of guy, anybody can call him. He'll take calls from, applicants for new development, he'll take calls from any board, and he'll work through you, and you get no charge for that at all, so.
Yep. Any other discussion, board members? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
Bill Servil, resident, ZBA member. While I have no problem with Mr. Maher or his company, I would point out that I think it predates this board sitting here from 2008. Mr. Maher entered into a contract with the township to revise our ordinance book for $25,000, I believe it was. And some of you may not even be aware of that because it's so old. There's a lot of reasons why it didn't happen yet, but it still needs to be finished, and I don't want to see him come back and charge us again. I know part of it was our building official was gone for extended period of time, other people were gone, planning commission got busy and couldn't work on it, but nevertheless, it still needs to be completed, and my understanding is planning commission is working on trying to finish up the revamping of the ordinances. At some point, I don't want to see Mr. Maher present a bill for that, he's already been paid once. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, board members, I sat on that board, and the board from 2004 did enter into contract with Mr. Maher, and that work was actually supposed to be completed and to the board prior to November 20th of 2008. And that scope of work with those revisions to the ordinance. And I believe he even, wasn't there a penalty, Mr. Huth? Remember that night? He said that there's gonna be a penalty if it wasn't done.
There was a,
Needless to say, it's 6 years later. I mean, you know, I'm a little concerned about that, you know, we had the contract and I believe the money's been distributed and we still don't have the product when the gentleman sat here, and I like Mr. Maher, don't get me wrong. I think he's a nice guy and everything, but that work still to this day from 2008 that was promised to the board still hasn't been done. And, you know,
well, I think part of
I don't
that,
know what this board
part
wants
of that
to
is,
do.
maybe Larry can talk to it, is, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, and if the planning commission needs more time to do something, he can't force a product out if they don't approve it. And I think they've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort making sure they're done properly, not
Yeah.
rushing it through because,
And that's it, and what you gotta keep in mind, during that time, there was a lot of ordinances that were also sent to Mr. Maher and the planning commission to change while we were in the process of actually developing the new ordinances. So the whole thing is, I can tell you that Mr. Maher has always, or his associate, has always talked about and schedules workshop, you know, we meet once a month. We've had a lot of issues and we have had a lot of things go back and forth. We are actually on the final pages right now. Our expectation is we were gonna complete it at the end of the year, so right now we're about 14 days late. But I think that we will have something to present to the board within the next 30 days. And a lot of that has been the planning commission. As we got busy, we were trying to have workshops after meetings. When meetings go to 9, 10, 11 o'clock, you know, it's not the right time to sit down and try to work out ordinances, because you're not gonna put the right language in place. So, you know, although, there has been some delays, and I guess I don't remember ever hearing or seeing a contract that it needed to be completed in '08, and I'm sure it's there, but, we have been diligently working on, and we've been going through page by page, trying to put in, you know, a pictorial for, you know, a picture tells 1,000 words. Sometimes it's very hard to read and imagine, but if you can see it, so he's been putting a lot of pictures, we've been updating it with the master plan as well. So you gotta remember, before that, right in the middle of that contract, we had to update our master plan. So the ordinances were put on hold till our master plan was updated. So that was about a year and 2-month delay right there to complete the master plan. So, you know, we've been working, I think, very well in conjunction with community planning to make these things happen.
I understand. I'm just saying that I was here and said, I guess I misunderstood the process. He, you know, because I believe it was Mrs. Eineman
We-
who
yeah,
was,
and
who
I
was
can tell
very,
you-
she was
Yeah.
all over him one
Right.
night asking, why isn't this done? You know, the scope of work completed in the proper time. And I mean, it's a question that has to be asked and for whatever reason. You know, I can forward the minutes on to, you know, to the
Sure.
board from there.
But I can tell you, during the master plan development, everything was put on hold.
All right. Any other discussion, board members? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Swakowski with support by Mr. Tominello to approve the execution of the 3-year contract extension with Community Planning and Management, PC, for professional planning services as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. With items D2 and D3 tabled, where we do have a closed session, that's item F, but we'll move right now to item E, which is public comments. We'll open up the floor for any public comments with a 5-minute limit.
Bill Servil, resident. I wasn't trying to malign Mr. Maher at all. I just was pointing out because I figured many people sitting there weren't even aware of that contract because it's such old news. And I did say there was a lot of mitigating reasons. I don't really care about any penalties. I just want to see it done. Sitting on housing and sitting on ZBA, we run into problems all the time because there's too many gray areas in the ordinance right now. I'm hoping that we tighten up most of those on a new ordinance. On another issue, this contract for the library, as we all know, sometimes things don't work out. The resume is quite sterling, but nevertheless, there could be something that could happen that maybe they want to terminate this. Is it going to be forever? Is it going to be an endpoint? It wasn't discussed. Is this something that's going to be ongoing for the conceivable future? And if so, is she going to have an open-ended contract? Is she going to be able to terminate it? You know, those kind of things need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. And again, the short answer to that question, absolutely. We want a contract that we and the individual can terminate on a relatively short notice. It wasn't my understanding from talking to Mr. Huth that the type of contract that we were looking at was something really groundbreaking, meaning that I think that the arrangement that we're proposing with this individual is probably not unique to us, or, you know, certainly it's unique to us in the sense that we've never had a library coordinator before. But in terms of having someone who works on a limited basis for, you know, a finite sum of money, and some of the basic protections, I think there's probably already a document that we're going to be able to modify that's going to cover a lot of those details. But we'll work with Mr. Huth on that.
I'm
But
sure it's
all
just gonna
good
be,
points.
I'm sure it's gonna be a contract just like we have Jason or anybody else, you know, just pretty much do the scope of work, here's your money.
Right.
You don't do the work, you know.
That's right. Yep. Any other comments? Any other board comments?
This has contracts, the art of the deal.
There you
Right
go.
there.
In case you need to reference anything.
Yeah, there you go.
Newsletter, yep.
Are there any other comments? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to enter into closed session.
So moved.
Support.
We've got a motion by
I
Mr.
guess we
York.
have to say why we're going.
I'm
to close.
gonna say
sorry.
it. Yep. I was just gonna
Okay,
read that,
yeah.
yep. We have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Swakowski to enter into closed session to consult with our attorney regarding trial or settlement strategy in connection with Maynard versus Harrison Township, Macomb County Circuit Court docket number 13-4714-CZ. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, Mr. Witt, will you please take a roll call?
Yes, Mr. York,
Yes.
Mr. Swakowski.
Yes.
Mr. Brado,
Yes.
Mr. Capral,
Yes.
Mr. Tominello.
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Verkowski.
Yes. All right, I'm going into closed session here at about 7:40 or so.